Yo, what's up, chefs? It's Vinny, and today I'm bringing you the ultimate guide to farming Trial of Sekhemas. But not only that, I also did 20 runs with the exact strategy I'll be teaching you today, set aside all the items of value, and we'll be breaking that down at the end of the video to give you a realistic idea of how much currency you can expect to make if you were to do this yourself. I'll briefly add that this video can largely be broken down into 3 sections, with a bunch of smaller topics covered in between, and there'll be chapters down below, so feel free to skip around to whatever you are interested in. With all of that out of the way, I'm going to try and keep this video concise and informative, so let's get started. First things first, we're going to cover potentially the most important topic, and that is the strategies behind farming the Trial of Sekhemas. And to do that, we need to talk about relics, because this is really where the magic happens. There are 4 different strategies that I'm aware of, all with a varying degree of initial investment required for the relics you'll need, and difficulty of the content you'll actually be doing. I'll be covering them all briefly, but we're going to primarily focus on the easy mode relic farm, because not only does this require the lowest amount of initial investment, and it's the easiest difficulty of content to do, but it's also extremely simple to transition from this strategy into any of the other ones if you are more interested in those. So, starting off with the easy mode relic farm strategy, because that's the one we're going to be focusing on. But also, once you understand this one, the other 3 will be very easy to grasp. Before we get into detail, I just want to add that I will be including this spreadsheet in the description. Not only is this going to show you which types of mods can drop on each type of relic, but I've also color-coded it to show you which mods are actually going to be worth your time selling for a really good profit, and of course, we'll be going into more detail on that in just a little bit. Back onto the easy mode relic farm strategy, and the primary goal of this strat, outside of just getting a ton of jewels, magic relics, and raw currency, is going to be to get 2 guaranteed unique relic drops from the final boss. The way we do this is the boss naturally drops 1 guaranteed relic, unique, and if you get 100% increased quantity of relics dropped by monsters, that goes up to 2 guaranteed. 200% is 3 guaranteed, so on and so forth. Now, the way we get 100% increased quantity of relics dropped by monsters is quite specific, and this is going to save you a lot of startup investment currency if you pay attention. There is a boon within the trial, I'll be including it on screen now, that gives you 30% increased effect of your non-unique relics. This means that since we're going to be getting this boon every single time, I'll explain that in just a minute, all we need is 77% increased quantity. We don't actually need 100%. You can only get increased quantity on these 2x1s, so we only need 4 of them. We need 1 with 20% and 3 with 19%. Just to show you the math on that, if you have 77 times 1.3, that brings you up to over 100%, which is the threshold. Looking at this relic, which is 20% increased quantity, 8% increased movement speed, this is going to cost you about 20 divine. I will not be recommending that you get ones like this if you have low currency to spend. Instead, I would recommend getting a 20% increased quantity and then just a random secondary stat. So the way you could look for that is if you go to the trade website, yeah, right here. The way I'd recommend doing that is just put in the 20% increased quantity, and then you can just leave everything else blank, search, and you'll find them. 1 to 2 divine, you're going to be good to go. For your other ones, I would recommend you get ones like this that are 19% increased quant and 5% or more movement speed, whatever you can afford. For one specifically like this, it's going to be about 2 to 3 divine. Of course, if you go more movement speed, it's going to get more expensive. And a really cheap option, if you don't have much currency to start off with, that's fine. You can go for something like this, which is 19% increased quantity and then a random secondary stat. You can get these for like 50 exalted. In addition to your increased quantity relics, hopefully you understand how those should be working now. There are a couple of other ones that are going to be important / make your life a lot better. You're going to want to get 2 more 2x1 relics with 18% honor resistance or more, and then a lot of movement speed. The movement speed will come in clutch, especially when you're doing this on repeat. And then you're going to have space for 2 more 3x1 relics. I'm going to recommend you get 1 with 40% honor resistance or close to it. That way, in combination, you're going to have 75% or more honor resistance, so you'll be capped. And then get some additional merchant choices. And on your final one, the main thing you want to get here is 3 additional merchant choices. The secondary stat, the best in slot, would be the reduced merchant prices, but you don't really need that one that much once you understand how to do the trial. Moving on to the other 3 strategies, and I'm going to give more of a TLDR here as to keep the video from getting too long. Starting off with the Giga Relic Farm strat, you're going to need 154% increased quantity of relics dropped by monsters at least. Then once you get the 30% boon, that will put you up over the 200% threshold. In order to get 154%, you're going to need 8 of these 2x1 relics. That's either going to be a seal or an urn. 6 of them would be 19% increased quantity. 2 of them would need to be 20% increased quantity, or whatever combination you want to use to add up to 154%. It's worth noting that if you have 8 of these 2x1s, you're only going to have 2 little squares left over, which means you'll have space for 1 final 2x1 relic. It's also worth noting that since honor resistance and quantity of relics dropped by monsters are both suffixes on these relics, that you'll only have that 1 final relic as a slot for honor resistance, which means at a maximum you will have 22% when you start the trial. Moving on to the Desperate Alliance Vase run. Now, there's 2 ways you can do this to my understanding. One, you can basically do an increased quantity of relics setup and then just slam in your Desperate Alliance if you have a really good build, because when you do the Desperate Alliance, we'll actually just go identify this to show you really quick. It is going to make the boss take 75% reduced damage, and he's going to do 100% more damage as well. That results in him basically having 4 times as much health. That's what the math turns out to anyways. So if you have a really, really good build, you can just slam this in to an increased quantity of relics setup and make a lot of profit. You'll be getting the Against the Darkness jewel guaranteed when you do this. Those are going for about 4 to 5 divine currently. So if you're spending 2.5 for the Desperate Alliance, you get the guaranteed jewel. That's like a 2.5 to 3 divine profit, which is quite nice. Alternatively, another way you can do this is forego the increased quantity of relic stuff, and you basically just get a bunch of merchant choices, honor resistance, reduced merchant prices, a bunch of things that allow you to just abuse the shit out of the merchant, which will then make the final boss, even with those increases to his HP and damage, still quite trivial, and you don't need to have as good of a build. And the final option is going to be the Last Flame run. Up next, we're going to cover the Boon priority, and this part is actually super important if you want to make your runs not only consistent, but also extremely easy. And maybe you've had a different experience, but I feel like when I was doing my research, learning how to farm the trial, that most people either avoided this topic altogether, or grossly undervalued the importance of certain boons, or just the general concept that has worked really, really well for me and allows me to consistently get every single boon, complete my runs in just about 20 minutes, have 100% of my honor remaining, and even have thousands of sacred water left over to convert into keys. So here is my boon priority list, and as you'll probably notice, there are a lot of things related to sacred water up towards the top. My reasoning for this is because ideally you want to be getting to a merchant and literally just buying every single permanent boon they offer you. The effectiveness of this is easier to understand once you experience it yourself, but essentially if you get to a merchant and they're offering you, let's just say hypothetically 10 minor boons, and they all suck, but you buy them anyways, that on your next merchant, those 10 boons will be removed from the pool of possible merchant options, hence leaving you with a higher chance to get the good boons. And not only does this make it so that you'll be getting those quality of life boons like Hare's Foot earlier on in the run, but you'll also be guaranteeing that you get Enchanted Urn before Zarok every single time. Now, of course, at the very beginning of the trial, you won't have enough Sacred Water to do that, so you should actually look at your choices and pick the best ones based on the priority list here and your own judgment. But if you focus on increased Sacred Water and reduced merchant prices, you will easily be able to get every single boon during your runs. Moving on to the Affliction priority list, and truthfully, you should just be avoiding Afflictions sort of at all cost, because a lot of them do suck pretty bad, but the top 4 on my list here will pretty much brick your run regardless of what build you are playing, depending on what part of the trial you are on when you get them. The other ones below that are also really nasty, but don't necessarily brick your run. Outside of these, it's going to be pretty subjective and dependent on your build. So of course, if you're playing an energy shield build and you get the one that removes all of your energy shield, then you're probably cooked, so you'll need to use a little bit of your best judgment for those. Up next, I'm going to be covering where the profit actually comes from and giving you a bunch of additional tips and tricks that'll make your life a lot easier when you're sorting through all the items you got, figuring out what to sell, how to set up your tabs when you're farming, and all of that good stuff. As for where the profit comes from though, this can be pretty easily broken down into 6 categories, some of which are more set in stone currency generators and some of which are more RNG based. As for the set in stone ones, the first of which is going to be raw currency drops, of course. You should expect to make a decent amount of raw currency, and you can get an idea of that whenever you see the 20 run calculated profit. In just a few minutes, I'll show you just how much raw currency we got from 20 runs. Moving on from that though, we have the unique relics. Desperate Alliance is of course going to be the main one. These are currently going for about 2.5 divine each, or if you wanted to sell them in bulk, get rid of them very quickly, you could do 2 divine each. And also the last flame relic, which I do not have currently, but if you get one, it is going for over 400 divine at the time of recording. It does have a less than 0.5% drop rate though, so you will probably have to do a lot of runs before you get one, unless you are quite lucky. After that, we have the Spectrum Jewels. These are also set in stone currency generators. The Sapphires are going for about 8 divine currently, ID'd and uncorrupted. Actually, the ID'd part doesn't really matter because there's no variance here. But uncorrupted, they're going for about 8 divine. The Emeralds, I believe, are going for about 1 to 2, and the Rubies are quite worthless, all things considered. Moving on to the RNG forms of currency intake, and these are going to be a big portion of your currency generation, just to be clear. But we have the magic relics. These are just 2 examples of the many that we got from the 20 test runs. And I would highly recommend for the relics making use of this spreadsheet. What you're really looking for is a double green, prefix and suffix for the seals and urns, or the tapestries and amphoras. Those are going to be your big money makers. As an example, if you were to get a max rolled movement speed and increased quantity of relics dropped by monsters, that would be well over 30 divine from that one relic. It's also worth noting if you get a yellow and a green, those are definitely worth checking out. And finally, if you get a yellow and a yellow, they're probably not going to be worth much, but it doesn't hurt to check them until you kind of understand which ones are worth selling. But usually you're looking for double green or a yellow and a green combined. As for the 3x1s, if you were to get a merchant additional choices and reduced merchant prices max rolled, you're looking at over 10 divine, but even the non-perfect rolled ones are still going for multiple divine, so they're certainly worth selling. Finally, for the incense, vase, and coffer, the 1x4s or like the 4x1s or whatever, the 4 slot total relics, just don't pick them up. They're all poop, they're all worthless, none of them are worth selling, nobody will buy them. It's not worth your time, and in fact, it'll actually waste your time picking them up and putting them into your stash. Moving on from that, we have the jewels. Now, price checking jewels is kind of a skill in of its own, so there's only so much I can really give to you in this brief video. There could be a whole video dedicated to how to price check jewels. but you are going to get a lot of them. This will kind of spoil the 20 run test, but I got over one full tab worth of jewels. A lot of those are emeralds and sapphires, which are the most valuable, but we also did get some rubies as well. And of course, we will be going through all of those, IDing them, rolling them to figure out our total profit here in just a bit. What I can do for you though is recommend that you get a price checker, something like Sidekick here. I have a video on my channel that explains how to get Sidekick up and running. It allows you to check all of these different mods. I have it set to put the minimum at 20% below the actual roll. So that way now when I hit search, I can see, examples of jewels that are similar to the one that I'm checking. For this one, since it is rolled so well, it is probably worth 10 plus divine. And it's very easy for me to figure that out with Sidekick. You can go up to the official website, just a click of a button, change some of the, stat filters and make it very, precise if you need to. After the regular jewels, we do have the time loss jewels, and these are a whole nother can of worms. You can try to sell them unID'd, but I've yet to really pinpoint the price for that. I'm thinking it's very, very low, like 10 exalted per. So I'm thinking that's probably not worth your time, and you'd be better off just identifying them, using a price checker tool, or giving it your best shot at trying to price them yourself. One thing you can always do is set up 2 different like dump sell tabs. You can just identify all of them. If you want, you could roll them all out, or before even rolling them all out, you could just throw them all into a price 1 divine tab, like set exact price, go 1 divine like this, throw them all in there, see if you get a bunch of whispers. If you get a bunch of whispers on a specific one, it probably is underpriced. If you get no whispers on any of them, those are probably overpriced. And you could just slowly lower the price of the whole tab over time, going from 1 divine to maybe 300 exalted, and then down to 150, so on and so forth, if you don't want to go through the process of trying to price check these yourself. Finally, before we get on to the 20 run test calculated profit, I'm just going to give you a couple more parting tips and tricks that I think will make your life a lot easier when sorting through the mess, figuring out what to sell, and all of that stuff. First off, I'm going to recommend you get a full quad tab dedicated to unidentified relics, just the 2x1s and 3x1s, of course. Once you get to a point where you want to, sort through all your stuff, like your tabs are full, you can take out just the small relics, ID them at Doriani, and then throw them into a separate tab. Similarly, you'll do the same thing with the 3x1 relics. ID them, put them into a large relic tab. After that, recommend you reference the spreadsheet, look at the good modifiers, look at the greens. You can go into your small relic tab, you can search movement speed, because that's one of the good modifiers, see which ones have movement speed, and then move on. You can do the same thing with the quantity of relics found, of course. I don't have any right now, but that's okay. And then for the large relics, you'll do the same thing, reference the spreadsheet, search for, I would recommend just search merchant, and that will cover all the bases. Finally, I'm also going to recommend you have a full other quad tab dedicated to just jewels, rares, crafting bases, amulets, rings, tablets, all that good stuff. And that way, once you get to a point where it's filled up, you can just sort through all of it, however you usually go about that process, and find the good stuff that's going to be worth a lot of currency. And last but certainly not least, we have the calculated profits from our 20 run test broken up and organized into 3 separate tabs. Some of these runs were done on stream and some were done off stream but recorded, and usually I would like to include some highlights from the runs in this type of video, but unfortunately this one's just getting a bit too long for that to really make the cut. With that being said, I will be including an extremely sped up montage of me sorting through, slamming, rolling, and then price checking all of the items here at the very end of the video, just for legitimacy's sake in case any of you were interested in that. Additionally, I have tried to record this segment about 3 to 4 times now, where I go over each of the items individually and give you some details on their stats and why they're priced the way they are. But every time I do that, it ends up being 15 minutes or more, which is just going to be too long to insert here at the end. So instead, I'm just going to go over the guaranteed set in stone currency generators first. Then I'm just going to briefly highlight over each of the items. You can see the price that I've got labeled here, and then I'll come back with the grand total profit at the end. Also, keep in mind, if you see a chaos orb, just multiply the number of chaos orbs by 10, and that is the exalted orb value of the item. If I tried to include 300 exalted orbs under these gloves, it would get quite large. So instead, I've just done chaos orbs, multiply it by 10, that is the exalted orb value. Starting off with the guaranteed currency generators though, from raw currency alone, we earned about 6 divine, more specifically 4 divine, 1 perfect jewelers, 22 chaos, and 119 exalted. And of course, this is after we converted everything up to exalted orbs or above, and this shakes out to about 6 divine. After that, we had 4 total grand spectrum chests. 1 of them we did not have a key to open. 2 out of the 3 that we did open, we got sapphire jewels, which is quite lucky, and that's adding on another 16 divine. After that, the last guaranteed method of currency generation, we got 5 Desperate Alliance vases. Each of these are going for about 2.5 divine at the time of recording. If you wanted to bulk sell them, you could do 2 divine each, so that's another 10 divine if you were to bulk sell all 5 of these. So all in all, that's about 6 plus 16, 22 plus 10, 32 divine of just guaranteed currency from the 20 runs. Following that, we have the more RNG related items, which are things that obviously we had to identify, or we picked up off the ground, identified, and rolled, or they just came good. And this is honestly where a bulk of your profit is going to come from. But like I said, unfortunately I just can't go over all of them individually. It would take way too long. So instead, I'm just going to highlight over them. You can see the price here. Once again, chaos orbs times 10. That's the exalted orb value. So we've got a ring, 70 exalted, another ring, 1 divine. This one I'm leaving unlabeled because it's kind of an insane ring, and I'm going to have to just list it at a high price and work it down to get a set in stone idea of how much it's actually worth, but it is quite insane. Next we have a gold ring. I've yet to even fully slam this one because it is unbelievably insane at 4 stats. That is 1 rarity roll to be clear. Wand, low max mana, good other stats, 1 divine. Boots, 30 movement speed, good other stuff, res, energy shield, rarity, 1 divine. Flat fizz gloves, intelligence, res, 300 exalted. Normal stellar, normal sapphire, about half a divine here and about 50 exalted here. Moving on to the relics, starting off with the seals, 20% increased quant, 2 divine, 19% increased quant, 15 honor, 150 exalted, 90 exalted for 10% increased movement speed, 20 exalted for 9% increased movement speed, 100 exalted for 18% increased quant and 20% honor, 10% increased movement speed and 10% double sacred water from monsters, 100 exalted, 80 exalted for 19% increased quant and honor restored, 20% increased quant, 2 divine, 9% increased movement speed and 14% chance to drop double sacred water, 1 divine, and then finally a double rolled 20% increased quant and 21% increased max honor, 6 divine. 2 choices, 6 reduced price, 1 divine, 2 choices, 7 reduced price, 1 divine, same thing, 1 divine. 3 choices, 7 reduced price, 2 divine, and then finally 23 honor res and 3 additional choices, 100 exalted. Onto the urns, 70 exalted, 60 exalted, 30 exalted, 20 exalted, 1 divine, 1 divine, and 4 divine. And this is the other spectrum chest we open. It's probably about 30 exalted, but I don't even know, it's kind of worthless. Moving on to the jewels, and you get a lot of jewels. As I'm sure you saw earlier, we got over a full tab worth of jewels, which did break down into some pretty solid profit, and we got 21 time loss jewels to be specific, and these are just the ones that were worth something. I'm not going to go over all of these individually. I'm just going to hover over them and you can see the prices here. These two are just super tentative prices. I actually have no idea really what these are worth. They're very hard to price check because there's not many time loss jewels on the market, especially with how many possible stats there are. So I wouldn't take these prices with too much more than a grain of salt. This one is probably worth about 5 divine. This one's probably worth more than 10 divine, but I really do not know for sure, just to be clear. And then finally, these last two, I actually have a zero clue how much they're worth, so I'm not even going to try and label them. It is what it is. And this one's probably not worth much, but I just want to look into this one more later. And looking at everything combined, you can see I've got the numbers written down right here. From the guaranteed sources of currency generation, we got 32 divine. From the magic relics, we got 22 divine plus 820 exalted. And finally, from the items plus jewels, we got 18 divine and 1420 exalted on the low end. The reason why I'm saying on the low end is because I'm not including either of these really nice rings, which would probably bring in another 5 to 15 divine at least. And I'm also not including either of these time loss jewels because the price is just too tentative and I'm not quite positive on it. I'm also not including these because I have no idea what the price is. So I'd say it goes without saying at this point that you can make a ridiculous amount of profit from doing Trial of Sekhemas, even when doing the very budget strategy that I outlined in this video. So I hope you guys enjoyed the guide section of this video and the 20 run test. If you did, make sure to subscribe, drop a like, share it with your friends. Other than that, hope you guys have fun in the Trial of Sekhemas, and good luck blasting. And last but not least, take it easy, chefs.
Watch your blue eyes fade to gray as you fade away.